Hi, my name is Tammy French. I'm coming to you today to talk about The Art of Public Speaking by Stephen Lucas, Chapter 16, which is Speaking to Persuade. If you would like to watch this entire presentation with closed captioning, please use the Communicate submenu on the UWW-TV website at UWW-TV.org. So thinking about persuasion, most of us can't begin to fathom how pervasive persuasion is all throughout our lives, throughout our culture, throughout our society, even within our personal life. We are constantly both trying to persuade people as well as trying to get them to do what we want them to do, and we're being persuaded by others as well. Persuasion is when we are creating and reinforcing and changing people's beliefs and values and actions. And again, this is something that we are constantly doing. Whether we're trying to get someone to take on the values and the beliefs and some of the actions that we do, or perhaps we're trying to get them to stop doing some things that we think are bad. For years, my parents smoked. And I can remember when I was a younger kid trying just about everything I could think of to convince them to stop smoking. For one, it worked. For one, it didn't work. Okay? So sometimes we're successful at our persuasion. Sometimes we're not. Sometimes our persuasion is, again, kind of something going on in our personal lives, but sometimes it can be in our professional lives as well. Whether we are going into education or going into business or science or communication, whatever it might be, there's going to be times when at work we need to be persuasive with our boss, with our clients, with our coworkers. And so certainly this complex notion is something that we have to think about how we can do as best as possible. Let's think of a controversial topic. What if I wanted to do my topic on snakes? Okay, my topic is snakes are great pets. What would it take to convince you that that's true? Now, some of you listening to this might be thinking, Tammy, there is literally nothing that anyone could say that would convince me to get a snake as a pet. No way, no way, no way. I am terrified of snakes, okay? But there may be others of you that think to yourself, wow, I've never really thought of a snake as a pet. I don't know if that would be any fun or any good. Others of you might be saying, you know what? I've thought for a long time that a snake as a pet would be kind of cool. And certainly these different groups of people that I just laid out are going to have different things that ultimately work to persuade them. Some people might focus on what we might think of as the science of it. So gosh, I need to learn about what kind of a diet a snake would need to have and if I could handle that. If I have to feed a snake a live mouse, well, that would be impractical and difficult, but also maybe a little gory for me. What kind of temperature and maybe terrarium do I need to have for my snake? Those kinds of sciencey kinds of questions. And if I can answer those, I might persuade people. Other people might be more based on logic. Look, I can only afford a goldfish right now. I can't afford some really exotic kind of snake, okay? And so if we could find some logical reasons why a snake is a practical pet, perhaps I could be persuasive. And of course, other people, perhaps the people that are really afraid of snakes, they might need more emotional appeals. For example, if someone's very afraid of a snake, they likely are thinking of these gigantic pythons or anacondas that you see in Africa or something, or in the wild, in the Amazon, I should say, right? But what about a tiny little grass snake that's never going to get more than, 8 inches long, and it only eats plants or something along those lines? If someone could, quote unquote, meet a snake that's little like that really only slithers around almost like a worm would slither around, perhaps you would be more likely to persuade someone like that. My reason for bringing up kind of this funny topic is because I really want to impress upon you that different strategies and different tactics are needed for different people. We are motivated or perhaps demotivated for different reasons, and so we need to account for that. Persuasion is really complex, and so we need to make sure that as we are giving our persuasive attempts, that we're trying different things, that we're coming at our topic from different angles so that we can catch as many people as possible. Another thing to keep in mind is that there are different degrees of persuasion. We think of all the way from along this spectrum, from strongly agree to strongly oppose and everything in between. We know that it takes a really long time for someone to go from the far side of this spectrum all the way to the other side, okay? So in our speeches, in class, for example, we only want you to move the needle a little bit. I think of myself when I think of this spectrum because I think of my approach to some of those big box stores. I don't know if you or perhaps some of your parents have memberships to like Sam's Club or Costco, those really big, large stores. The stores, the way those kind of stores work, there's probably others that I'm not thinking of as well. The way they work, though, is you pay to have a membership to them. And that membership, gosh, now I bet it's like $40, $50. A couple years ago, it was about $25, I think. And if you pay to have a yearly membership, then you can go shop at those stores. So back, I'll say 10 years ago now, I can remember thinking, that seems ridiculous to me. I should be able to shop and pay good money for your products if I want to go in your store. Why would I pay for the privilege just to walk through the doors? That to me seemed a little silly, and so I couldn't imagine doing that. So I would say I started, again, 10 or 15 years ago, probably at maybe moderately opposed to joining such a thing, okay? Well, then I started to hear from people that did join, and they'd say, you know, you can get some really good deals. And if you shop there often enough, you can make up that membership money over time. And I thought, well, maybe. I don't know. I don't have any Sam's Club or Costco close to where I live, so it's still not very practical. I don't know. But I was starting to get a little more skeptical of myself, really, and my beliefs. So I probably moved up more to like slightly opposed after hearing some of my close friends and family say that they really like these stores. Well then, about probably about 6 years ago now, my kids got into high school and they started doing high school sports. And so you remember that if you did sports or even other activities like, I don't know, band or music or maybe trap shooting or some of those high school activities, very often there's a snack shop, there's a concession stand, and parents are expected to bring stuff to stock the concession stand. And so I remember when my oldest was a freshman, I was put in charge of Gatorade. I was supposed to bring a big pile of Gatorade. Gatorade's kind of expensive, and so I certainly didn't want to spend more than I had to. So I thought, well, maybe I'll try it. Maybe I'll try getting a membership so that I can buy cheap Gatorade. So I did. I got a membership to Sam's Club, bought Gatorade, and yes, I probably saved quite a bit of money on that, okay? So I maintained that membership for a little while as I would help out with some of these kids' functions that I had going on. So I of course, moved up the spectrum a little bit farther. I was probably more than neutral. I guess I would have had to put myself in slightly in favor if I eventually got to the point of actually buying a membership, okay? So right now, I have to confess, my membership has lapsed, again, because I don't, my last remaining high school kid hasn't needed my help in that way, as well as the fact, like I said, that things are still not very convenient. But my point of this long-winded story is that we sometimes can be persuaded, but it takes time. And in my case, it took several different reasons for me to have to be moved to actually go check that out, okay? So in your speeches in class, don't expect that a group of people that are on one far side are going to switch all the way to the other side. You might be having your goals be a little too lofty if that's the case. But if in 5 to 7 minutes in your persuasive speech you can get them to move just a little bit, you can consider yourself successful. Another thing we really want to keep in mind when we're being persuasive is we have to remember our target audience. We have to remember that often, even though we might have a large audience of a lot of people, there's a select group of people that we really want to persuade. I mean, sure, it'd be great to convince everybody in the room, but if we only convince this one group, it's important. I had some friends back in my hometown that they're kind of quieter. not very authoritarian kind of people, and they had to speak at a city council meeting in Rhinelander for something big that was going on in their neighborhood. And there was a lot of people interested, so there was a lot of people in the community at this meeting. But there was, I think, about 8 or 10 people on the Rhinelander City Council, and it was those people that my friend's parents had to persuade. Yeah, it'd be great to persuade all of the people in the room, but you got to stay focused on that target audience. So make sure that you're keeping your target in mind. Now, when we think of our persuasive speeches, we can sort of categorize persuasive speeches, if you will. Sometimes we're just trying to get people to see things the way we see them. And that might be called a question of fact. Other times, we're really trying to get people to buy into the same sort of values and ethics that we have, and that might be a question of value. And then lastly, we might really want to change people's behaviors, change their actions, get them to do something or get them to stop doing something, and that's called a question of policy. So we're going to go one by one through these. First of all, for a question of fact, the speaker might argue that the audience should see the facts the way I see them, the speaker sees them. Now, sometimes people get a little confused in this and they say, Tammy, wait a minute, facts are facts. I mean, how can you argue with facts? Well, you don't have to look beyond politics to figure out how people can argue facts. Sometimes we interpret facts in different ways. Think of this example. The New England Patriots cheated in the Deflategate scandal. Do you remember Deflategate? That was a couple years ago. Bill Belichick and Tom Brady were accused of deflating the football just a little bit so that, I don't know, Tommy could throw a little farther or something like this. And of course the Patriots said, we didn't do it, it was an accident, or we didn't even realize it was not intentional. And their opponents, of course, were saying, oh yeah, it was. Oh yeah, it was. Well, the truth is the balls weren't up to the inflation rate that they should have been, apparently. That much is a fact. But we can argue the interpretation of that. We can argue if it was intentional or unintentional, what were the consequences, and so on and so forth. So a question of facts argues that the audience sees the facts as the speaker wants them to see them. A question of value. The speaker argues the worth of some idea. So the speaker argues that something is good, or something is bad, or something is right, or something is wrong. And then the speaker hopes that the audience will then agree with those set of values that are being put on. Perhaps my topic is that deer hunting is a good practice for the environment. Okay? Maybe a little controversial. Some of you might be saying, oh, deer hunting is wrong, you're killing baby deer. And other people may say, hey, deer hunting is actually, you kind of have to thin the herd a little bit. There's not enough food out there to have an entire herd of deer, so we have to thin it out so that the deer that survive have enough to eat. Either way, it's a question of value, and the speaker is going to try to argue that people see the values the way they do. Now, the last one's called a question of policy. This is where the speaker is trying to get the audience to do something or stop doing something. So this kind of question implies action. Maybe a better name would be a question of action, to be honest. So this is where, again, you're going to argue to the audience that there's this good thing out there, maybe donating to the poor or volunteering your time at a soup kitchen or something along those lines. And you're going to tell people why it's good, why they should do it, and you're going to give some specific instructions for then how they can execute that. Or maybe you're going to argue that something is bad. Maybe I'm going to suggest that people stop using so much social media, or they only go on social media for an hour a day. And I'm going to explain why too much social media is not good for our ego or not good for our soul or something like this. And I'm going to explain how we can impose some self-imposed regulations so that I can get off social media a little bit more, perhaps. Okay? Now, here's the thing. It's important to understand that by you classifying your speech as a question of fact, a question of value, or a question of policy, this is going to help pick the strategies and the tactics that you use within your speech. It's going to help guide you to understand if you need to make sure you have lots of action statements within your speech, for example, or if you need to make the audience understand the values that you carry, or the different interpretations of the facts. So make sure you're thinking ahead about that. What kind of a question do you want to have for your speech? Now, when I organize my speech, we're going to be using what's called a statement of reasons format. And what this means is that all of your main points are going to be reasons why your thesis is true. you're going to make sure that every one of your main points kind of, if it doesn't literally start out this way, you can imagine the words, the first reason is, in front of that main point, okay? So let me give you an example. Here's a sample thesis. There are 3 reasons why intelligent life exists on other planets. And by the way, notice that the number 3 is in there, just like we used for the informative speeches. The carbon atom is very versatile, radios have picked up signals, and new exoplanets have recently been discovered in the habitable zone of the solar system. All of these main points are worded as reasons, okay? And so that's why this fits the format. Note that there's no main point that says, my own experience with intelligent life on other planets. That main point isn't worded as a reason, and therefore it doesn't fit. Let's take another look. It's wrong for public schools to sell junk food in vending machines for 3 reasons. Why? It contributes to obesity, it contributes to cardiovascular disease and diabetes, and it's overpriced and therefore wastes money. Again, we can see very clearly that they answer the question why. Each of the main points answers why, and essentially you're giving reasons. Now, as a little quiz for you, what kind of a question is this? Is this thesis? This thesis is worded as a question of value. You're saying that it's wrong for this to happen, and that's a question of value. If you were playing along at home, the first one about the planets and the intelligent life, that was a question of fact. So that's kind of a fun thing to take a look at. Let's have some fun. Think for a minute about this as a thesis statement. All students should be required to study abroad for 3 reasons. What might those 3 reasons be? What might you think? Well, let's see. It probably would expose them to other traditions and customs. Good. That would be a perfect reason to list down there. It might help students appreciate diverse lifestyles. Good. Both of those would be excellent main points because they fit that pattern of reasons that it could be. One of my main points is going to be my experience traveling in Scotland. No, that would not be a good main point because it's not fitting that statement of reasons pattern, okay? Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't, in this example, you shouldn't talk about your experience in Scotland within your speech. Absolutely. It just shouldn't be a main point, okay? If you're having any troubles about this, I know that your teachers would be glad to help you. Now keep in mind a couple things as we go through your speeches. First of all, make sure you're being audience-centered when you're choosing your topic. Ask yourself, does my topic have a larger appeal? Does it connect to the audience? Is it something that, yes, I care about, but I know that I can convince my audience to care about it as well? We want to make sure we're connecting in that way. Make sure that your topic is thoughtful and substantive. Make sure that it's got some weight to it. We're in college now. I had a speech a while back on 3 reasons why peanut butter is better than jelly. That might be a cute speech for a junior in high school. I don't know that now that we're here as college students, that's very substantive and very appropriate. And lastly, remember that you're going to need to tell us what to do in the conclusion. We want you to have some kind of an action statement in the conclusion. So if you're doing a question of policy, that action statement should be obvious. If you're going to tell us that we need to make sure that while we're home over break, we do some volunteering, well, get specific with us. Give us some specific websites we can go to so we can find volunteer opportunities. Tell us some names of some organizations that we can contact if we're interested in what kind of volunteering we would be doing. But be very specific with us. Now, even if you're doing a question of fact or a question of value, you can still urge us to act. You can still do that call to action. For example, we used as an earlier example the New England Patriots, right? Well, maybe in my conclusion I would say something like, so the next time you're in a football discussion and you're debating the value and the greatness of Bill Belichick, you can bring up Deflategate and you can tell them, you know what, Bill Belichick is just a cheater. and use those arguments there. Even in the question of value, talking about vending machines in high schools and things like that, or grade schools, you can talk about perhaps the next time you find out that your younger brothers or cousins or sisters or whatever are having these vending machines in their school, maybe you want to make sure you're telling their parents that to opt for better nutritious choices and to get their schools to offer more nutritious choices. So what I'm saying is, in your conclusion for that call to action statement, tell us what kinds of things we can do. Even if you're just trying to change our mind about a subject, that can be really, really useful. Let's talk about some topics that don't work very well. These are topics that I've actually had in class. There are 3 reasons why we should all convert to religion, fill in the blank. I've had plenty of speeches on religion. And interestingly, many students will say, well, we shouldn't ever bring up religion in a state-run class or something because you would be too offensive. That's not really the reason why this is an inappropriate topic, though. True, when we think back to that spectrum, that slide that we looked at earlier, it's very unlikely that you're going to convert someone's religion in 5 to 7 minutes, and that's really the problem with this topic. Is it's very unlikely that you're going to be successful in your persuasion. But honestly, the idea that people are going to be offended because the topic of religion is brought up, I don't think that's true. I think it's very possible that we can bring up things that we believe in and things that we feel are good for us or ways of viewing the world that we see. And I don't think it necessarily has to be offensive if I'm sharing that viewpoint with others. So the idea that I perhaps like my religion and I think everyone should join my religion, that doesn't have to be offensive. I said to you a long time ago, I think the first lecture we did, that's one of the beauties of this class, is that we can share diverse viewpoints. We can share diverse ways of thinking, and we don't have to be so thin-skinned that we're going to be offended if somebody feels differently than I do. So that's not the reason that this religious topic is a bad one. The reason is simply that it's just not going to be successful in 5 to 7 minutes. The reasons you should take COMM 110. I hope it's really obvious why this is not a good speech topic. We're all in COMM 110, right? And so for that reason, the topic just doesn't work. We need to have a topic where we can actually get people to change. And since we're already in this class, there's no room for change. And lastly, the great qualities about my cat. Notice it doesn't say the great qualities about a cat or cats. It says my cat. And while people might enjoy the topic of cats in general, if I'm too specific, if I'm too focused on my own, in this case, pet, the audience might be thinking, I'm not sure that this really applies to me at all, okay? So as I think of better topics, realize that your better topics, first of all, are going to have at least 2 sides. There have to be 2 sides to the topic in order for you to be able to have change happen. Okay, there's 3 reasons why you shouldn't drink and drive. Is there anyone out there that's really pro drinking and driving? No. Okay, so there's probably better topics out there. Maybe you want to discuss penalties for drinking and driving, because I think there's different controversies that can come up there, for example. Make sure that you're opening your ears and eyes. I like to tell students that if they can't think of a persuasive topic, think of things that bug you. Think of things that irritate you. Think of things that kind of get under your skin a little bit, and that might lead to a good topic. And then lastly, think of your audience and make sure you're being respectful. Again, while I want us all to be mature enough to handle diverse perspectives, diverse topics, diverse viewpoints, absolutely. By the same token, we, the speaker, have a responsibility to handle topics in a respectful way and to understand that people in the audience may see things a little different than we do, okay? So as we think about persuasion, as we think about some of the things that we have going on in the world, the things that we have going on in our own lives, both professionally and personally, certainly it comes to mind that we need to get a handle on some of the different strategies we can use, perhaps some of the strategies being used on us so that we can be persuasive. Please remember that if you would like to watch this entire presentation with closed captioning, use the COMMUNIC8 submenu on the UWW-TV website at UWW-TV.org. Take care.